We've got the details of Matthew Stafford's contract adjustment. The Rams add a cornerback, and we got Camp Nuggets. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor, join the party and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and also, what are your big takeaways from the first part of training camp, and also what's your reaction to the adjustment on Matthew Stafford's contract? Who will be the Rams quarterback next season? Let us know down below. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Report, SI, Dodgers Nation. Now the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, the Rams sign a veteran cornerback. Also, the adjustment on Matthew Stafford's contract. We have the details, and we've got some camp nuggets we're going to get into, all that more. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Travis. So got some camp news, got some signings. The news is coming in. Of course, we're waiting to see the details of Matthew Stafford's new contract adjustment, whatever you want to call it, but it was reported by Rappaport. He tweeted out yesterday, the Rams and quarterback Matthew Stafford have now agreed to terms on his adjusted contract, sources say, as he gets an additional $5 million this year, money moved forward from a later contract year, an additional $4 million guaranteed roster bonus next year. So what the Rams did is they moved some money around. They increased his guarantees, and the adjustment doesn't cost the Rams any new salary. The move just take $5 million from a later contract, and they put the $4 million next year in the new bonus. He goes from going to making $31 million in 2024 to $36 million, and that ties him with Daniel Jones as the 14th highest paid quarterback in 2024. So we're talking about an increase of $5 million, basically $9 million total overall, essentially, depending how you look at it. So to me, my first takeaway is I'm a little surprised that all this offseason hoopla was around this. This is all it took, really, to get Matthew Stafford in camp and keep both sides happy.
Yeah, the numbers are surprisingly modest, assuming that we're talking NFL quarterback modest, right? By human beings, not so modest, but by NFL standards, relatively modest sums of money. I think it's interesting. I wonder if this isn't maybe something they're doing to kick the can down the road to do something else later, right? To postpone or to at least stall, to maybe, to put it to a point where they can work something out that's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer moving forward, because this feels like a very temporary solution to what it is. And quite frankly, like you said, Doug, I think the part that really jumps out at me is not necessarily specifically Daniel Jones, but that's the neighborhood that he's in right now. Money equals respect in professional sports. Daniel Jones is a certain type of quarterback. Matthew Stafford is a much better type of quarterback. And I would imagine that at some point that has to get squared away.
Yeah, and if you look at it from that standpoint, you could say, his cap hit, it went up to $44.5 million. And that makes him the third highest paid quarterback with the cap hit. Only Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott are higher when it comes to the cap hits in 2024. But I totally agree with you. As far as the perception of it, you see him lumped in there with guys like Daniel Jones. That probably won't sit right for people as far as what Matthew Stafford has accomplished in this league. But the number one takeaway for me is, what does this mean for next season? Because if you look at next year, his base salary is at $27 million, but none of it is guaranteed. So I think that if this year He puts together another Pro Bowl level season. They make a deep run in the playoffs like this organization expects to do. And Matthew Stafford stays healthy and he stays productive. They're going to get back to that negotiating table and they're going to work something else out to keep him happy.
I don't think that the underlying fundamentals of what we're talking about have changed all that much, right? I think that what was true a week ago is still true today, which is Matthew Stafford is still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. The Rams window is directly tied to how long he's a member of this team. The Rams don't do messy. So I still think that we're going to get to where I thought we were going to be by now, but we're just going to get there a little bit later. The Rams, I would be really surprised if all of a sudden it got to the point where they're ready to move on. There is no better option for them in-house or out-of-house that makes any sense right now. I think Matthew Stafford still really enjoys playing NFL football. I got to see him a little bit at camp and kind of just watching him from a distance and interacting. It seemed like he was very enthusiastic and excited to be out there. So I don't think that this is a matter of him getting ready to walk away or wanting to go somewhere else. The relationship he has with Sean McVay is very special. While it may take a little longer, while the numbers didn't really pop out, the basic fundamentals of this are the same. The Rams are going to go as far as Matthew Stafford can take them. Matthew Stafford deserves to be paid accordingly, and I think that he will be, and it'll get worked out before too long. I think that, like you said, who's the quarterback of this team a year from now? I'd still be really surprised if it weren't Matthew Stafford under a new deal.
Yeah, unless he decides to retire, they win the Super Bowl, and he's the MVP, and he's a little banged up, and he gets a little bit of, okay, I'm going to go to Canton. I have the gold jacket. I accomplished that goal. And look, guys, after a long, rigorous, violent NFL season, they think one thing, and then we know things start to change when the summer months roll around and training camp starts. So maybe we'll start to have the same conversation that we've had with Aaron Donald about Matthew Stafford, but hopefully it's a good problem to have because it will mean that they won the Super Bowl or something like that. I will say, though, the big word for me is flexibility. The Rams have flexibility. Matthew Stafford has flexibility. And if, for whatever reason, Matthew Stafford does decide to retire or they do want to move on, they could go that route. But you and I both know that if Matthew Stafford is healthy, even at this age where he's not old, he's just becoming a classic. We know that, right? Even at this age, he's still one of the best 5 to 10 quarterbacks, has one of the best 5 to 10 arms in this league, and you wouldn't want to move on. He is the biggest, most important part of this window for the Rams, and you need to try to maximize that as much as you can. But here's the thing, too. He's cheap. He really is. Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, he's not getting 53, 55. You look at these new contracts. I mean, he's great value at that price. So the Rams have to feel amazing about that.
Yeah, no, the value is there, but I guess the trade-off is at what cost to, as far as everything that's not an actual dollar, right? Like, does he feel good about it? Are you spending that money in the proper places in the rest of the organization? I think the other part about this too, that, and not trying to get too far ahead of this, what is Sean McVay's future without Matthew Stafford? Does he want to, we've heard about this enough times over the last few years is he coming? Is he going? That coming into this season is the first time in a few years where that hasn't been a topic. He seemed re-energized last year, but if he has to break in a brand new quarterback, if he has to trade or they sign as a free agent, a veteran quarterback and start from a new spot, what does that mean for Sean McVay? All of these things add up to Matthew Stafford's the quarterback of this team. Not forever, obviously. Look, the scenario that you painted, Doug, about where they make a run to the Super Bowl, they win it, he's an MVP, he walks off into the sunset, all that. Great. Then that's a great story to tell, and that would be a fun problem to have to take care of. But I really think that this is something that's odd, but I don't think it's scary. I think that he will be the quarterback of this team for at least a couple more years.
I totally agree 100%. I think anytime an NFL player is 36, you kind of have to take it year by year, no matter what. But if you're a betting man, I definitely think it's a safe bet at this point. But kind of last point on this, though, is this thing wasn't ugly. This thing didn't get ugly in the media. They handled it quickly. They did it quietly, and they got a deal done. Not like we see up in San Francisco with Brandon Ayuk and the drama that's surrounding that. The Rams... Considering it's LA, the soap operas all filmed here, right? All the drama, not a lot of drama within this Rams organization. And that's the best possible thing when it comes to training camp because you don't need those distractions. And I think both sides handled this extremely well. And it's a real testament to what this organization has built. But Yeah, what did you say, Travis?
It's funny to me when I was out at camp on Friday and I was talking to, I talked to quite a few people, a lot of different people, both inside and outside the Rams. I can tell you this, nobody from the Rams talks. They really don't. Like they just keep this stuff very in-house. There's no eye rolls. There's none of this stuff that like the body language that makes you feel like, oh, it's actually a little worse than maybe you thought. They're really buttoned up. They keep this stuff very close to the vest. They take care of their guys. They don't do drama. And that's why I think that as a Rams fan, and if the everydayers out there that are diehard Rams fans, you should feel good about this because they typically get the stuff done that needs to get done.
Yeah, credit to the Rams. No leaks, right? They put it in the vault. Same with the Dodgers. The Lakers, though, it's like, I'll tell the guy at the gas station, the guy at the checkout of the grocery store. I mean, that's what you respect about this Rams organization for sure. But coming up next, the Rams add some cornerback next. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right. You guys know this. I love sports. D-Mac loves sports. We love him so much, we never want him to stop. But it's kind of a weird part of the year, right? There's just a weird lull in the summer where we're waiting for football to get going. Basketball is just about done. We get fewer games, and the sports aren't quite sporting the way that you would like them to. But FanDuel keeps the sports going whenever you want, whenever I want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that we're in the mood, right? And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So, for instance, if you were thinking of a complete and total Dodger bullpen meltdown, cash your ticket at the window. If you were thinking about them sitting on their hands doing nothing, cash your ticket at the window. You can come up with all sorts of things at FanDuel. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. They're going to get going. Go check out those World Series odds. Go check out those pennant odds. Even the division odds are a little bit different than they were not that long ago. And it's all right there at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate you. And you should join that Everyday Listeners Club too. All you have to do is watch and listen to every single episode of Locked On Rams, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, I think I said Rams 15,000 times right there. But in this next segment, we got more news we got to get into. There's nothing that I love more than a signing or a trade. And This is not a blockbuster signing or anything like that, but it does pick up on the last episode we had where we discussed Darion Kendrick's ACL injury. How quickly were the Rams going to add depth? Well, the big development after that was Darius Williams. You lose him for a few weeks due to a hamstring injury. So at that point, you absolutely needed to add some depth. And they did just that by signing Jerry Jacobs. And I like the move. I think you bring in anyone that has some familiarity. He has some with Aubrey Pleasant, and he's spoken very highly of him. You look at his production. He started 29 games in 3 years, 12 games last year with the Detroit Lions, has 4 picks, 23 pass breakups, and 131 total tackles and 9 TFLs in his career. Also is a UDFA out of Arkansas. We love the Razorbacks. Do we? I don't know. But what are your thoughts on the Jerry Jacobs signing and just the idea of bringing in a depth piece so quickly there?
Well, I think it goes without saying that we all love the Razorbacks, right? When you and I are not talking about the Rams or the Dodgers, we're all over Arkansas Razorback football. That's kind of where you and I live and breathe. Look, he's a pro, right? And the Rams have a hole. The Rams have a deficit at that particular position, like you mentioned. Darion Kendrick goes down for the season. Darius Williams had a hamstring injury a few weeks. And by the way, hamstring injuries are really scary. You never know exactly when that guy's going to be back, and not him specifically, but that sort of injury that Williams has when he's good to go. And Jerry Jacobs is a guy that you can feel reasonably good about, right? He's like you mentioned, all of the starts, all of the picks, all of the things. He's an NFL player. Whether he's at the top of his game or not, time will tell. Whether or not he's going to stick with them, time will tell. Whether he starts for them, time will tell. But you need live bodies. You need guys that know how to play in this league. And Jerry Jacobs is one of those guys. This is Ahkello Witherspoon, just a different guy, right? Kind of checks the same sort of box. Maybe a little bit more of a dynamic playmaker in Jacobs along the way, but you need NFL professionals, and you're short at that spot, and Jerry Jacobs checks that box.
He 100% does, and I think, too, you look at where this team is this season, you really can't mess around. You need NFL-caliber players, even though they do have those young, talented, high-potential, high-upside type players within their organization. Guys like Trey Tomlinson. I think, too, Josh Wallace out of Michigan is someone interesting to just keep your eyes on to see if he gets an opportunity. We know the championship pedigree that he does have, but, yeah, absolutely think that with the injury bug just sinking its teeth into this Rams secondary already, it was a 100% a no-brainer move. And Sean McVay said he played good football. He has some good tape out there. Aubrey has a history with him from his time in Detroit, so that was important. And then he also said that he would be open to the idea of bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon. We also talked about that. The everyday listeners will know. And he said about Ahkello, I would never eliminate it. I thought he did a really good job. I loved working with Ahkello last year. And that's definitely something that you wouldn't eliminate. So it feels like they're entertaining the possibility of adding another cornerback, depending on how things play out.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is, okay, let's find somebody. Let's put him in there. Let's see how it looks. If it doesn't work out, then let's find the next somebody. Maybe you're already, like we mentioned, 2 guys are down. You need to fill those 2 spots. Witherspoon, I think, checks a lot of those boxes like we were talking about. Familiar, somebody that understands the culture of the Rams. He could slide right back in there and feel pretty good about that. You mentioned his name a second ago, D-Mac. I think it's really interesting for, what does this mean for Trey Tomlinson? What does this mean for him and his future with this team, that they're very aggressively looking outside of the building to try to fill some of these holes? Does Tomlinson at least get a look at this? Does he get an opportunity to try to grab some of these reps in camp in the upcoming exhibition season? I think that'll be really telling because, like we talked about, 2 guys go down and very quickly they start looking outside the building for answers as opposed to inside.
For sure. And look, this is a NFL starter, right? I mean, you actually have a starter here with Jacobs, and he had 2 picks against Jordan Love last season. By the way, I need to point out a correction. He's not a Razorback. He's a Red Wolf. He went to Arkansas State. The disrespect is real.
We like that even more. We're all
exactly. No, exactly. Now it's serious. It's definitely serious for sure. And I do think that when you look at the starting cornerbacks, I mean, that's an area where hopefully 8-9 weeks into the season, we say we feel a lot better about that position this year than we did last year. We know Ahkello got off to a really good start to this season, had some highlight interceptions, but I think the potential is better for this team with Trey White if he can perform like he has when he's been healthy throughout his career, and Darius Williams with his familiarity and what his potential is. So I'm really high on the secondary as far as the outside cornerbacks, but they just need to be healthy.
Yeah, they've got health issues right now. It's interesting because we know how Sean McVay is going to play this in the preseason, unless he does something radically different this year than he's done in his first 7 years as the head coach of this team. We're not even really going to see what this looks like in a really meaningful way until Sunday night against the Lions in week 1. That's really the first time we're going to get to see it. We can see it in drills. We'll get to see it in some other things, but because they operate in the preseason the way that they do, we're never going to get a real good look at what the full rundown of that defense, especially the corners, are going to look like until we get to that first game. That's just how the Rams go about doing it. So they can shuffle the deck. They can bring guys in. Guys, unfortunately, are always going to end up getting hurt. That's just the nature of how this goes. But until the season starts, you're just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I think the big wild card here, too, is if any of these injuries linger or you suffer another injury or guys get banged up, how does Jacobs look? Because this is someone who has been a starter for good portions of his career. Last year, he had career highs in interceptions and tackles. And the only reason why the Lions didn't bring him back is because that contract expired and you went out there and you drafted Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. So the defensive back room got a little crowded there. So it's not like he's not a quality player. So I think one thing to look at is if he exceeds expectations, this guy's going to go in here, and I guarantee you today he's waking up saying, I want to steal one of those jobs. I want to be a starter in the NFL. So I wouldn't roll that out as well. So we'll see what happens. This could be a situation where a really, really nice player fell into their lap, and they make the most out of this situation in a position where the Rams have really had some struggles in the recent season. So very high on this idea. I really like them.
Yeah, I do too. You know, I use this word all the time, and I always qualify it too, because I think that it can sound condescending, and I don't mean it like this at all. I mean it as a compliment. He is competent. He can do the job. He is a pro. Like, yes, it would be great if every defensive back that the Rams brought in was Jalen Ramsey quality, right? If you just had a bunch of those guys available to you, awesome. They just don't exist. So what you do need is a guy that is competent, that can do the job, that's an NFL caliber player, and certainly Jerry Jacobs falls into that category. It is a guy that, look, if he ended up starting week one, I don't think either of us would be particularly surprised. And not just necessarily because guys are getting hurt and there's vacancies, but rather he goes in there and just wins that job straight up.
For sure. No doubt about it. For sure. By the way, he also went to Hutchinson Community College. They are the Blue Dragons. So that makes up for the Arkansas thing there. So let's hit it on the next topic, too. So coming up next, guys, some camp nuggets. Mr. Travis Rogers was out at Rams camp. We're going to talk a little Ernest Jones coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, it is almost football season. We're close, but right now we are in the midst of baseball season. And who doesn't love going to a Major League Baseball game? I know that I do. I know that Doug does. You think about it. Think about the first time that you went to a big league ball game, and that moment where you kind of walk through and you get to see it. How cool would it be to kind of go through that all over again? Maybe take somebody that's never been to a game before, but you got to get your tickets, right? You got to get your tickets. That's where the Gametime app comes in, because the Gametime app is going to hook you up with all of your MLB tickets and other high profile events in your area. Concerts, comedy, theater, whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, Gametime has you covered. But you got to put the Gametime app on your phone. Here's why I like it. I'm a little bit of a procrastinator. Sometimes I wait to the last minutes. And of course, you can get great deals at Gametime. The prices for MLB tickets actually go down the closer we're getting to the start of those games. But none of this matters if you don't have the Gametime app on your phone. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL. That's going to give you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, so the pads go on today at training camp, but you had an opportunity to speak to Ernest Jones. Yeah. You caught up with him, and he's going to be big for this team. I mean, basically one of the big team leaders, team captains. And I think for me, he has so much to prove this season, not just to himself, but this organization, because if he puts together a really solid to great year, he's going to get an extension with this team, and I think he'll be a Ram for a long time. So I think that's what's in the car for him. A big year for him, I think, means his future really is cemented with this organization.
Yeah, it certainly could. I could not have been more impressed with what I heard and what I saw talking to him on Friday afternoon out at camp. And, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about what's it going to be like with Aaron Donald not in the building, and not just holding down his spot, but him being in the building, him being the guy that's setting the tone, that, nobody messes with anybody in that building because Aaron Donald's there. I feel really good knowing that that Ernest Jones is the second coming of the leader of that defense, that he's the guy that's going to set the tone. That's great, because he is an incredibly impressive presence. He's bright, intelligent, aggressive. Like, it just, everything that we talked about on Friday was about how he wants the Rams defense to be nasty, to be physical, to put hands on guys. And I was really excited about that. I was impressed. You could tell he's very comfortable taking on a leadership role with that defense. And I think he had one prior, but now that Aaron Donald is not there, it lands on his shoulders perhaps to even a larger degree. But I was very impressed with what I heard and saw. I really liked him a great deal.
And we know, too, when it becomes a situation where they have to decide whether or not they want to lock guys up. It goes beyond just the on-field production. It's, are they a team leader? What do they mean to the locker room? What do the intangibles look like? Well, after practice, Sean McVay said of Jones, guys love him. I mean, when you're around Ernest, there's just this magnetism and charisma that he has. He made a couple of plays out there, and it was really good to be able to see 53 out there leading the way today. And he had missed time during the OTAs, was really not involved dealing with a knee injury. So it's really good to see him back to full strength. And I think the number one thing you have to look at when it comes to Ernest Jones heading into next season is, do they pick up where they left off last year? Because it's kind of crazy when you think about it. He was a starter halfway through his rookie year, but he really didn't break out and get that bump until last season when you started using him more in a blitzing role. Last year, 13 of his 19 pressures in his career came last season. I mean, it's kind of wild when you think about that, the fact that he's been starting so long, but the fact that he's getting to the quarterback with more regularity. They use him as a blitzer 91 times for his whole career. 58 came last year. So, I mean, just when you look at that right there, they've really changed the way they used him, especially up the middle. And with this team struggling to get to the quarterback, that's definitely an area where he was able to help. And now with Jared Verse and you have Braden Fisk, you have no Aaron Donald, that's where he can really shine in this defense.
You could tell he was excited about Verse and Fisk, and just listening to him talk about those guys and how they fit in and how they've integrated themselves into this defense. And like you said, it feels like a player like Jones just got here. He's been around. He was on that Super Bowl team. You know, we were talking about that too, that he shows up in the league. He goes 1 for 1 and just like, oh, this is the NFL. You just show up and win the Super Bowl. It's like, yeah, well, maybe not exactly that. So obviously a little bit of a different education over the following years, but he is the right man in the right spot at the right time. I'm very optimistic about him leading that defense and being that veteran presence out there. He's been around the block a few times. He's got a great deal of experience, and I think he's really starting to come into his own, maybe as a star in this league.
Yeah, I love that you say that he's a star, because really every single person, every single player on this Rams defense and team, and really just defensive players in the NFL in general, are overshadowed by Aaron Donald, right? Yeah. So with him gone, it's going to allow him to really force him into even becoming more of a leader than he already has become. And just the production, I think, is going to match the charisma, like Sean McVay says, and I think he could put himself in a position to sign a new deal with this Rams team and getting some real solid foundation at that position where they haven't really invested a ton of money in, and they don't like to use huge assets and resources in. But I think for the right guy, they would. I think Ernest Jones certainly is that right guy. But that's to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.